All right, then. Before we get into the thick of it, as Steve mentioned beforehand, from which I would assume meaning more the theological aspects, just something about the halachic aspects, that is the Jewish legal aspects of this. We began to talk about last week the section of Shabbat, and we'll get into it. We finished. We're exactly at 16, verse 16, going forward. And just to give the background for what is happening, why does it matter that it's Shabbat? If you turn the page to the second page to source number 1 from the Mishnah, from Shabbat, this is something I've done with the groups when we have, excuse me. When we've dealt with the sections in the other parts of the gospel about the Shabbat, and this became a wedge issue. But what is it based on? What is it based on? How is that considered work, that Jesus would place his hands on someone, or in this case, tell someone to get up, or give me your hand and tell somebody to get up? Why is that considered work? And the first thing I want to say, and I know many of you know this, but I just want, for those that are relatively new to our groups, it's important to, Shabbat, it's not about work being forbidden. Work is too simple of a word and not descriptive enough. It would be better probably to use the word artisan crafts. That's the word that I use. The word in Hebrew is milacha. Milacha, which, by the way, also is connected to the word malach, angel. It has to do with having a purpose. It's purposeful work, perhaps we'll call it. No, that's also not good. So you can, for instance, according to Jewish law, you can move a sofa in your house. There's nothing wrong with moving a sofa in your house, right? But you can't carry a Kleenex in your pocket outside of your house too, in public domain. I know it sounds absolutely bizarre, but it's because it's you can have warm food, but only if it's been warmed up on a hot plate, and not using any electric appliances according to Orthodox law. You can some Orthodox Jews won't brush their beards or comb their hair because the hair might come out. There's a lot of different things. You can't pick at something if it's going to bleed on Shabbat. There's all these little things that stem from this particular Mishnah, this rabbinic tradition. And I think it's good for people to know this in general about Judaism. When Christians come to learn something about Judaism, what does Sabbath mean? From a rabbinic point of view, and today Orthodox and some conservative Jews, it stems from this rabbinic tradition. If somebody could read number 1, Shabbat 7, Mishnah Shabbat 7:2. Ajit, you want to give it a stab?
Sure. The primary laborers are 40 less 1. Sowing, plowing, reaping, binding, sheaves, threshing, winnowing, selecting, grinding, sifting, kneading, baking, shearing wool, bleaching, hackling, dyeing, spinning, weaving the selecting, grinding, sifting,
the making of 2 loops,
weaving 2 threads, dividing 2 threads, tying and untying, sewing 2 stitches, tearing in order to sew 2 stitches, capturing a deer, slaughtering or flaying or salting it, curing its hide, scraping it off its hair, cutting it up, writing 2 letters, erasing in order to write 2 letters over the erasure, building, tearing down, extinguishing, kindling, striking with a hammer, and carrying out from one domain to another. These are the 40 primary labors less 1.
Okay, so let's get past the less 1. The 40 less 1 is a mnemonic device used in rabbinic literature. You'll remember it better. You'll remember it easier if it's 39. We can argue about that. These 39 different categories come from all the different acts that were needed to be done in the observance of the temple rites, the temple ceremonies in biblical times. It all has to do with when you think of bringing the showbread, the bread, so that anything having to do with planting with bread, with that kind of an offering that is an agricultural offering, has to do with sacrifices of animals, has to do with erecting the tabernacle, taking it down. That's basically where it comes from. And that word milacha is a key word in all the descriptions of the building of the tabernacle in the second half of the book of Exodus. And that same word milacha is the word that's used in the creation story when God ceases to do milacha on the seventh day. And so the rabbis took those two key words of the sections and telegraphed them together, and hence you get these. This is what it means to stop doing melacha, means to not do any of these things. Now, I don't want to get too much into the weeds here. This isn't our topic, but did anybody see the word healing here? Or something that's connected to healing even?
No.
So the one that is connected to healing, believe it or not, or perhaps you think, is the second line, second word, grinding. How were medicines made in ancient and still today? But did many of us grew up with a mortar and pestle on our parents' on the above the fireplace? There was I don't know why it was there, but there was a brass mortar and pestle. I don't remember ever using.
I worked in a pharmacy when in high school, and the pharmacists actually made medications.
Right, but Richard, let's remember, you're really old.
Yeah.
No, but what the grinding of it. So that's where it comes from. The fact that healing is forbidden on Sabbath. There's another thing as well, drawing blood. Bloodletting was already practiced in those days. There's a few things that, by the way, the Talmud, the section on Sabbath is huge, and much of it is devoted to, these are the 39 major categories, but each of these categories are broken down into subcategories. So
I have a question.
Sure.
The Talmud was compiled sometimes after the time of Jesus, probably 200 to 500 years CE. Therefore, this instruction from this Mishnah would not have been available in the time of Jesus.
No, not exactly, Ajit. I hear what you're saying. We say that the Mishnah was edited, put into writing and edited around the year 200. That's the first level. Then the Talmud is the discussions of those Mishnah, which were oral discussions that went on until about 600 even, okay, between 500 and 600, part in the land of Israel and part in Babylonia. But the Mishnah that was put down in writing was oral tradition. And so we assume those oral traditions, they existed. Then look at, according to Orthodox belief or Talmudic belief, those oral traditions were given to Moses at Sinai. So if you're Orthodox and you're traditional, then there's no problem, right? But those like us would say they were certainly around at the time in the first century. And we kind of know this because of another section of the Mishnah called Avot, which perhaps I've quoted before. It's wisdom literature, but that quotes sages from the second and first century BCE. And so there was a tradition of the oral tradition. Now, is this exactly what it's talking about? But there's really no other explanation as to why they would hit on this particular thing. Why would they care if Jesus is healing, right? It's not on Shabbat, which is why you've got, I think it's necessary background. I can't really say more than that. But it wasn't so. It wasn't so cut and dry when it came to healing in sick people. A lot of exceptions were made. The major exception, somebody mentioned already last week, is for pikuach nefesh, for if somebody is dying. If a life is threatened, then none of this stuff matters, right? You go ahead and you save the life. And so I don't think we need to do it, but the next two sections deal with and they're later, right? They're from the Talmud itself. And the rabbis that are mentioned are even later, but they still reflect this conversation that it's not so simple. When it comes to healing, it's not so simple. A lot of things are permitted, whether it's warming up water or whether it's crushing crushing herbs for an animal. If you can crush the herbs for an animal that's sick, all the more so for a human being. And all I want to say with this is that Jesus was not out of line. And again, this is John. This is a late tradition. This is more appropriate. These comments I'm making for Matthew or one of the other gospels is talking about the Jesus healing on Shabbat scenes. It's not so out of line. And it's kind of like it's being nitpicky. It's the Pharisees being far more strict than they needed to be, perhaps we might say, but they're certainly going on the strict side. And that's the cultural historical background of the story we have today. Now, of course, it went on to be something greater in the synoptic tradition. It's Jesus is the Lord of Shabbat. What is it the Lord of Shabbat? What was the term that's used? I think. And so what does that mean? But that actually flows into what we're about to do today. The last thing I will say is that in Hellenistic literature, Hellenistic Jewish literature, that is non-rabbinic literature, but say Philo and others, there's a discussion about what do you mean God rests on Shabbat? And the conclusion was with many early thinkers, Jewish, Greek-speaking thinkers, that, oh, God rested on Shabbat only that first Shabbat. Right? Because how could it be that the things happen? Nature continues to work. Babies are born. Children, trees grow. Everything grows every day of the week since then. So they came up with the idea that God rested only on that first Shabbat to serve as an example for human beings, and so that's in the background of this as well. If Jesus is God, is connected with God in such a close way, there's no need for Jesus to rest also. So that's kind of the background I think I certainly needed before going ahead with the next section. Before we go on, any comments or questions about that?
Yeah, that's really helpful, David, and exciting to me to hear that background. So what's your conjecture about today, the pushback against Jesus healing on the Sabbath, given what you just said? What's your takeaway?
My takeaway was that one of the successful things, I think, if I'm thinking historically, and this all and conjecture is certainly the right word here, but it feels like if Jesus was becoming popular, let's talk right now about the synoptics, not before this is written. If Jesus is popular, Jesus is making a name for himself, then it is through his ability, amongst other things, to heal. He's not always the nice guy, the nicest guy. He's not always turning, making multiple loaves out of, one with whatever. He's not made those miracles, but the healing seems to be quite prevalent, right? In the gospel traditions, he's out there. And so what the Pharisees are doing, or at least the description given, they're against us or they're against him because of the thing that he was succeeding at so much on a popular level. And then they decided, and it's not that they invented something that didn't exist. They invented something forbidden. No, there were those that were more strict about it, but they went in the absolute strict way. And so the authors of the gospel, whoever started these traditions, was genius in that they said, let's take something that is so human, so compassionate, and show how those that were the legalists, they put the legalities above compassion, let's say. And that's in order to, that would be my guess as to, I'm sure this is nothing original, right?
Yeah, that's great. Now, one last question about the application of number one to temple observance, right? Or to life. Does this transcend that, or I guess in a more legalistic way, it's applied in other areas?
It's applied, but not in the temple. And the reason for that is that in Jewish law, as in many other legal systems, I would imagine, when you have a positive commandment and a negative commandment. So a positive commandment is to offer a particular sacrifice on the Sabbath, and a negative commandment is not to do melacha, which includes slaughtering or drawing the blood or whatever it is. Then the positive commandment wins over the negative commandment. So for instance, if a baby boy is born in such a way on a Friday, so the eighth day, am I right? Yeah, so the eighth day is on Saturday, on Shabbat. On one hand, you're not allowed to do anything to the body that will cause blood to flow. That's the negative command on Shabbat because of this Mishnah. The positive is to circumcise a boy on the eighth day. So the positive wins over. It's a positive commandment to maintain life. That wins over anything negative, and that goes across. That goes in all different fields. For instance, you're not allowed to marry your sister's, your sister-in-law, right? That's incest. I mean, we had that with the story with John the Baptist, right? With Herod. You're not allowed to, but in the case of when her husband dies childless, and then you as a brother, you're allowed to. That's a positive mitzvah commandment that wins over. I'm not using the right word. That is more powerful than the negative one. So that's what happens in the temple. But Jesus wasn't doing this, and you, yeah, yes, okay, but
Nice.
okay. The story, the way it's told, by the way, with the man here, the invalid by the water, also it feels like it's almost emphasizing that it wasn't life-threatening. His whole life he's been doing this, right? He's been doing this for years. And so why on Shabbat does he have to? So the naysayers would say, oh, Dafka, especially on Shabbos, he had to go down and do that. That Jesus, that scoundrel, Okay, all right,
Nice.
Anything else, Ajit? Did you want to ask something? No. Okay. So, Stephen, you want to read for us, Stephen Byrne, from 16?
Yes.
Because you've been off the hook for a few weeks.
Get back in practice here. Therefore, the Jews started persecuting Jesus because he was doing such things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is still working, and I also am working." For this reason, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, thereby making himself equal to God.
And there lies the point. That to me is that's why I took the time to bring this other exactly. And in that way, Jesus is in attune with other Hellenistic Jewish thinkers, not rabbinic. I never remember seeing a conversation in the Talmud. Maybe it's there, but about what does God do on Shabbat? Actually, there is. Yeah, but not in the same way. Not that was only for the first Shabbat. Okay, you want to go on a little?
Yes. Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing on his own, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. The Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing, and he will show him greater works than these, so that you will be astonished. Indeed, just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whomever he wishes. The Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son, so that all may honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. Anyone who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and does not come under judgment, but is passed from death to life."
Okay, Steve, it's up. I leave this to you pedagogically. Should we continue to read? Should we take a break and discuss? How should we do this? Because this is kind of more your territory.
Well, not necessarily, but I think I would be curious for those for whom this may be fresh or relatively new. What's your take? What comes across in a fresh way before we kind of try to analyze it? Ajit?
Here, it seems to me what is being said is that belief in Jesus is life and not believing in Jesus is death.
Okay.
But
Anybody else?
No, but I want to add something.
It's great. Ajit, no. Oh, good.
So when we talk,
Okay.
we talk about the miracles of Jesus, him raising people up from the dead. are we then talking about it in a spiritual sense that they were infused with faith in Jesus, therefore they came to life? Or are we talking about physically being dead and being raised to life? Am I stating my question clearly?
I don't understand.
Okay. Here we're saying that belief in Jesus is life, not believing in Jesus is death, is how I read it.
Did Ajit, I'm sorry, but I missed half of that just because it froze. Did
Yeah, for a
everybody
minute.
else get that?
No.
So
Yeah, I think I hear it asking, he says, is he talking about a spiritual life and death or a physical life and death? Am I understanding that correctly, Ajit?
Yeah, because a lot of my Christian friends believe that Jesus raised up the dead. And I'm saying, is this an explanation for raising up the dead here?
okay, Don.
Yeah, the way I read this section, it just is such a unity is created between the personhood of God and this particular person calling himself Jesus. Um, you know, it's symbiotic almost. It's looked at such a tight unity, and it is also um, an incredible teaching moment too. Teaching to readers of the tradition of the scriptures.
Nice. Ellen?
The
Ellen?
thing that really strikes me as we read this is it seems to me to be saying, if you don't believe Jesus is God, then you don't believe in God.
Yeah,
Got it. Nice.
yeah.
Good.
I think that I agree with that.
Wayne, do you have a thought on that? Or how does this strike you? Sorry to put you on the spot, Wayne. I'm just trying to get everybody's take before we break it down.
So Wayne, we need you to unmute.
Sorry, I thought I did. My bifocals weren't working. I agree with Don and Ellen, although I'm struggling with the verse 24, and I guess that's what they said. But anyone who hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and does not come under judgment. So if you just believe in God and not Jesus, do you then have eternal life? Is that what that last sentence is saying?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, but thanks for that take. I mean, yeah, it appears to, right? I mean, I can see how one would make that assumption or conclusion. Anybody else have a thought on?
I mean, I think that the word is honor, though, not belief.
Yeah.
The word what?
The word is honor. HONOR.
Honor.
Not
Mhm.
not faith or belief.
Isn't the honor due to the faith in the fact that Jesus comes directly from God and the Father-Son relationship?
I don't know. I don't know because I can't get my mind around some of these words. But I think there's a awful pointing back to God, the Creator. Jesus was a Jew, and he respected the traditions of Judaism. And Judaism taught ethics and morality and the love of people for each other. And so I think he honors that. These words are honoring that whole tradition, the whole ball of wax, so to speak. I don't know, that's my take on it.
As you know, maybe it's because I'm a lawyer, but the verse 22, the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son. Does that mean he's in the Old Testament, as I understand it, and certainly correct me, there were lots of judgments by God, by the Father. So is he given all that, abrogated that responsibility to Jesus?
The power of attorney. Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah, Harold,
my take on this is that basically what Jesus is saying is that I guess he's claiming here to be the Son. That he is the Son who God the Father sent, and that if you do not honor him, if you do not honor the Son, you do not honor the Father. Or as Ellen was saying, if you don't believe that Jesus is the Son, then you don't believe in God. And you're also giving up any hope of eternal life. To me, this is coercive. It's coercive. It's,
Yeah.
to me, I don't see any
Amen.
difference. I think it's a threat. That's my take on it.
Well, that's great, Harold, and I always love your take. The idea, going back up to verse 18, for this reason the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him. And by the Jews, again, we've just got to remember, we're looking at this text, 20 centuries after the fact, with overlay after overlay of practice and belief and persecutions based on this. But in the text itself, as we've said, John's gospel is very Jewish, and the early Christians were Jews who believed in Jesus, right? But not necessarily in such an exclusivistic way as suggested, I think. And for this reason, they were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, which is disputable, like David's introduction, we can talk about that, but also, and this is the crux, but also calling God his own Father, thereby making himself equal to God. Now, this is the community of John interpreting it in that way, right? They're making that assumption. But then Jesus continues to say, and I think this is the key, in verse 19, very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing on his own, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. So, is this creating a new idol, a new God? Jesus is now, that the concept and the person of Jesus, Jesus, or Yeshua, however you want to talk about it. Does that mean now, if you don't believe in him, and what does that mean? Then you're cut off from God? I don't think so.
No.
I can't imagine it being that way. It gets perverted in that way, and totally understandably, given the persecutions over many, many centuries. I just think it's a tragedy. And my take is that Jesus is is a mystic. He's a prophet who is recalling his people and everyone. So when you read Jews, I want you to also read Christians in the Middle Ages, you Christians, because the Christians in the name of Jesus have persecuted Jews as unbelievers. And that's the same thing that's happening here. So you religious legalists, you folks who think you've got God in a box, you think all your laws are the thing itself and that's who God is. No, God, it's about partnering with God. It's about living beyond a way of religion to a more, I would say, universal understanding of what it means to be a human in relationship to God, of whatever religion you may come from. This happens to be focused and located in this first century with the Jewish Christian religious controversy. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Any response to that?
Yeah, Stephen, I getting back to what David said, I like you and what you said. I like the word overlay. Over the centuries,
What is that word?
Overlay.
What word?
You use the
Overlay.
word overlay. Okay, so over the centuries, this mistranslation that happened between the Jews and the guy with the mat and the authorities can get diluted and complicated and can spin off tangentially in a way that forms erroneous belief or forms belief that's not accurate to what was really meant at the time. And you can see this in the breakup of the traditions, Jewish tradition and Christian traditions. You can see how the councils took off in a different direction. You get the surfacing of the Holy Spirit. You get the legalism of what the church decided in the early councils, and you get the break off of Protestantism. So all of it spirates to something different in our current century. And we are, in a sense, if we're not careful, we get further and further of what you said about the human's relationship with God. What you just said about being a human being and having a relationship with God.
Yeah.
Don, I really appreciate what you just said, because you remind all of us that this question wasn't settled until the 4th century, right? Through these church councils. So the early Jewish Christians, who then morphed into mostly all Gentiles, who then morphed into the religion of the Roman Empire, it becomes religion. And their theological disputations are always about the uniqueness of Jesus, his nature. Is he fully God? Is he fully human? How can you be both?
Yeah.
And then you get the overlay of Neoplatonist philosophy trying to solve it's almost like a Rubik's Cube, but and yet once they establish the Orthodox Christian theological frame, then everything gets judged by that through the rest of history. So I think we have a chance to, get in, have access, an inside out, bottom up understanding by the fact that we're asking these questions.
And
so thanks, Don. Anybody else? Harold, what's your take to that, to what I said and that conversation we just had? Harold, did you hear me?
Yeah, I'm not, I don't have any specific comment.
I would just say, asking, because you had said earlier something that was just right on target. I mean, you set the table for me in what you said, because it's either or. It's like, it's either this concept of Jesus who is that in the 21st century? What are we talking about? You the construct of Jesus over time. I think this comes down to, maybe Ajit said it, an inside out spiritual faith that sees not only Jesus as dependent on the Father, as he said, I do nothing alone. I'm totally dependent on the Father. Well, the whole community had access to the Father. And as Isaiah or Amos or the early prophets, and just the whole story in the Hebrew text seems to me to be playing this out also. This now gets crystallized in the person of Jesus. And I totally admit, and maybe I admit in a positive way, that there is something singular about Jesus, right? For me, undeniably, inescapably. And that's where my faith comes from. But in Jesus, I see Jesus happening in all kinds of folks, regardless of their so-called beliefs. And I think that's what John is trying to tell us about this idea of belief.
Yeah.
It's not a noun. Belief is not, do you believe that? It's a way of thinking. It's a way of perceiving. It's always verbal in the Gospel of John. It's pistuo. It's the verbal form, meaning believing, faithing. It's an active, dynamic way of seeing. Let's put it that way. In my take.
Can I add something here?
Of course.
If you go back and read the Jewish scripture, for example, in Exodus, God says to Pharaoh, Israel is my firstborn son, and I say to you, let my son go that he may serve me. And in someplace else, it says all the Jews are sons of God. In a sense, when Jesus is saying, I'm the Son of God, or people are saying Jesus is the Son of God, we're saying, acting as if the people of the time would be very angry and surprised. Whereas what I'm suggesting is the Jews all believed that they were sons of God. Why would they be surprised by Jesus saying he's the Son of God?
Well, and like it or like him or not, Paul makes that case over and over again. It's like, we're now, you Gentiles who are not part of the original, olive tree, you have been adopted as sons and daughters, right? It's like we non-Jews are given access to sonship and daughtership in the way I think I heard you say.
What I'm saying is that this seems to say that the Jews were very upset when somebody said Jesus is the Son of God, whereas what I'm suggesting, they wouldn't be upset at all because they all believed they were all sons of God.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm suggesting.
Though as used in a different way, of course, right?
Huh?
Used in a different way. One is particular, one is collective. Tina, did you, first of all, welcome. Is your name Tina?
Yes.
So welcome to our group. I'm not sure if you've been with us before. We're thrilled to have you with us. Where are you sitting? Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Southern California. I met you at my stepdad's funeral.
Oh, yes, of course. Gary Miller's. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm sure all the names that you have passing by you.
Didn't recognize you with your hat on. Well, so Tina, it's good to have you. Did you want to chime in at any point? You don't need to, but if you'd like to say something.
Thank you so much I'm so grateful to your wife for hearing about this. I'm like a 20+ year women's Bible study, and this is meaty and academic and just fascinating. So I'm very appreciative to be here. But as we were talking about these different facts, I was really struck with what our roles are as either Christian or Jew in this particular climate. I challenge my Christian lady friends constantly saying, aren't we acting like Pharisees nowadays? Where it's like, we are this and nobody else is welcome. That's why this group just, I'm so grateful for, because it's like, I love the word overlay as well. It's like this overlay, it's like, we're not either or, we're not separated. We should be joining together and stop acting so legalistic. So just the touchstones that we've already talked about to bring in the academic background to it is just, I'm really grateful to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. And may this study together serve to lift up the memory of both your mother and your stepfather.
Yes, thank you so much. By the way, you guys, he's lovely, absolutely lovely at those services.
Thank you. Anything else before? Yes, Harold. So now it's settled in, it's percolated, and Harold is going to give us an edict.
In this passage where Jesus refers to himself as the Son, it's not said explicitly, but I've kind of been assuming that what he means is the Son of Man. Is he claiming to be the Son of Man? Here's my understanding of who the Son of Man was. That 2,000 years ago, that in this setting 2,000 years ago, the Son of Man was believed to be not God, not one with God like in a Trinity, but Son of Man was supposed to be kind of a cosmic figure who would come and impose peace and harmony all over the world, and that that was the world to come, so to speak. This was like the quote afterlife was here on earth, and that the Son of Man was to do that, and that Jesus is claiming to be the Son of Man, that he's not necessarily claiming to be divine. He's not claiming to be one with God or part of a Trinity or I guess duality or whatever, that he's not claiming to be literally one with God, but that he's this cosmic figure that is preaching that the end times are near, and there's going to be a huge change in the world where all the bad people will be swept away and the good people will be in peace and harmony. And by people, I mean not necessarily Jewish, non-Jewish, everybody. That's kind of my understanding of it. Is that making any sense with regard to this?
Harold, I would say, especially in the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus's own consciousness of his work, his mission, is he identifies, I think, with the Son of Man, as you just laid it out, right? Daniel 7, the one coming to bring God's way into this age, which is under, as they put it, Satan's rule. The age to come under God's rule is coming. And so I think there is that. But the deeper question is, what is Jesus's own self-consciousness? What is his consciousness? I mean, how does he see himself? I think if we can tiptoe back into that, we can see how he identifies with the compassion, the love of God, his Father, as he puts it. And that his mystical mind to make accessible to all. As I am, you can be. And or you are. As I am, you are. If you can let go of your constructions about who God is or what God is supposed to be. So in a way, this is a call to kind of let go of presuppositions, of our own conceptual theories, and kind of, open up in the way that I think he is calling to do. Stephen Byrne, we haven't heard from you in 3 weeks. What's your take?
The Son thing made me think a lot about that. Son of God references and Son of Man references, and those come up again in the verses right below this, where he uses both. And I've always wondered about that. I don't know that I understand that. But what occurred to me when I was reading this morning, and I was remembering, I think it was in Isaiah when we studied, and God said, "I will make you a light to the nations." And if you just took sun out, and I'm not trying to be sacrilegious or anything, and put light to the nations in there, it's like Jesus is saying to them, there's a bigger picture here than whether or not I healed the guy or told him to pick up his mat. I'm telling you that, you know, God has a different plan for all of us. And that idea of being light to the nations, that the nations can only function well if they're looking to the Father. So I don't know if any of that made any sense, but
and let go of all the idolatry, and to let go of the concepts, which are basically idols, right?
Yeah. So that's what was rolling.
Every construct of God, I think, is an idol.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to suggest that we move ahead because it's going to get even more complicated.
Okay.
So do we have, Wayne, would you like to read going forward, 25?
Sure. Very truly, I tell you, the hour is coming and is now here when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For just as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself. And he has given authority to execute judgment because he is the Son of Man. Do not be astonished at this, for the hour is coming when all who are in their graves will hear his voice and will come out, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. Go on.
Yeah, I think Steve is frozen. I'm
Yes.
kind of looking for a direction here. Why don't we go on and then so those that want to talk about this difficult passage, make note of it and we'll get to it afterwards. Let's go ahead.
I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, I judge. And my judgment is just because I seek to do not my own will, but the will of him who sent me.
Go ahead.
All right. If I testify about myself, my testimony is not true. There is another who testifies on my behalf, and I know that his testimony to me is true. You have sent messengers to John, and he testified to the truth. Not that I accept such human testimony, but I say these things so that you may be saved. He was a burning and shining lamp, and you were willing to rejoice for a while in his light. But I have a testimony greater than John's. The works that the Father has given me to complete, the very works that I am doing, testify on my behalf that the Father has sent me. And the Father who sent me, he himself testified on my behalf. You have never heard his voice or seen his form, and you do not have his word abiding in you, because you do not believe him whom he sent. You search the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life, and it is they that testify on my behalf. Yet you refuse to come to me to have life, and I do not accept glory from humans. But I know that you do not have the love of God in you. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not accept me. If another comes in his name, you will accept him. How can you believe when you accept glory from one another and do not seek the glory that comes from one who alone is God? Do not think I will accuse you before the Father. Your accuser is Moses, on whom you have set your hope. If you believe Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But if you do not believe what he wrote, how will you believe what I say? That's a mouthful, a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask just a quick question. What New Testament translation is this, Rabbi?
This is the New Revised Standard Version.
Okay.
In the world, the academic world that I come from, there's even something probably better now, but this was usually what, either this or the New English Bible was what my teachers at Hebrew University suggested we use. But
Because I'd like to look at this in a couple of the translations, as some of this is very confusing to me. It's been a long time since I've really looked at John closely.
So we want to get some reaction. I'm just going to give my from looking at this and this is the first time that I'm going through this material. It seems to me that the author of John here is polemicizing with two other competitors. One are the John, the devotees of John the Baptizer, in its own kind of competition for what is the original understanding of Judaism. And the other would be, I think, the Pharisees who lift up Moses as the lawgiver as being the most important part. And that's how I kind of, to taking a step back from this, and it feels like to me, this is, no, this is something that is different. It's still, it is, I don't want to say Judah, it's the religion of Israel. It's the faith of Israel. It could have gone this way, which is close to us, the Baptists. I'm calling the devotees of John the Baptizer, or it could have been the way that it's been for many years, which are the devotees of Moses. In other words, the Pharisees. But I'm bringing you something which is far more eternal and consequential. Steve, does that ring true at all with you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I love the two ways that it could have gone. And the polemicizing also, David, I would remind us that by the time this was put together and made public, to my recollection, the Christians who were Jewish or who were Jewish were removed from the synagogue. They were forbidden. So there was a split early on. And in some ways, the Jews in this text are they've been cast out, and they're trying to explain or interpret or justify. That's another way to think of it in terms of the polemical piece.
Okay, so yes, go ahead.
As a point, just a point, thought that there is still a whole group of people that believe in John the Baptist that never accepted Jesus, and they exist in large numbers in Syria and Iran, and they call them Mandeans.
Mandeans, yeah.
We actually brought this up a few weeks ago, I think, before I had the honor of meeting with their chief priest in Stockholm.
Yeah.
They thought I had far more influence than I did, and thought I could influence the government in getting them a piece of land. Their church needs to be on the water, directly on the water. So yes, fascinating stuff. And ancient.
There's a bunch of businesses here in Austin that are run by restaurants and run by Mandeans here. So,
and they use Aramaic as well.
They use Aramaic as well. I think the point that is being made here is simply this: that the Jewish faith prophesies Jesus, and if you don't believe in Jesus, you're not even a good Jew. That's a kind of the comment as I read it.
Okay, well, our time is almost up. I would challenge this, and I think we'll probably have to do just a little cleanup of this section because there's so many issues of resurrection and afterlife. But my challenge to that, Ajit, would be the same challenge that I made to mostly youth, and especially in Israel when I was all the years I was in Israel, where kids would say, you know, I don't believe. Do you believe? I don't. Either you believe or you don't believe. And my answer to that was, it's not a yes or no question. It's what do you believe? What's the nature of your belief?
Yeah.
And so it's not believing in Jesus and everybody knows what that means. It's what about Jesus do you what is it about Jesus? How is Jesus connected to God? Part of God, Son of Man, only sent by God. And that's something that it's still kind of up in the air. And then what are the not repercussions? What are the results? What are the implications of those beliefs? How does that affect your behavior according to what you believe about Jesus and about the relationship with Jesus and God? So I can't say that I'm clearer on these issues after this last hour. I'm probably more confused.
Well, the good news is that it just piles on from here on. So
excellent. Bring it on.
We'll have lots of opportunities. But I do think that last paragraph, 39 to 47, that crystallizes something what I was trying to say earlier. But maybe we can just glance at this, David, before we move into chapter 6?
Yeah.
Next week?
Okay. So hold on to these sheets. We'll take a look at that last paragraph again, and then we'll move into chapter 6, God willing, next week. Thank you all for being here, and have a good Shabbat in the whatever way you understand Shabbat observance.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi.
Shalom. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.